I am super excited about this one. Over the next 2 videos, I'm going to be building possibly the smallest functioning office you've ever seen in this unused corner of my workshop. It's going to be dedicated to video editing and recording voiceover, so it will need to be acoustically treated. And because of the small size, I'm going to have to be clever in how I utilize this space. In this 2-part series, you're going to see all the wins and most likely fails of how I turn this 4 square meter space into my new office for the business. I am so excited. Let's get into this. Those 2 boards are poplar gum and they weigh like 1,000,000 kilos. So first up is building the frame, which I don't need to tell you about it. I'm just going to show it to you. But there are a couple of things that I need to keep in mind while I'm doing this. There's also a few things that are going to be done in a particular way for particular reasons, but I'll let the video play out. I don't want to spoil anything yet. But overarching all of that is I'm trying to get the most real estate possible out of this space. So whether that be by length or by height, it's a very limited space, so I want to maximize it as much as I can. And I should also point out that I'll be using best practices as much as possible during the build, but I'm not following any kind of local code. This is going to be a lightly built room, so it can be pulled down relatively easy. And it's certainly not going to be an addition to this house. But if you do see anything, leave it down in the comments so everyone else can learn and I can get that engagement. I wanted to quickly talk about the color of this pine stud material that I'm using. It is very red or pink. Here in Australia, we color the timber material that we use for framing. It's either going to be blue or red like this. In the south, they use blue, and then up here in the north of Australia, we use red. The difference is the type of termites that you get in the north and the south. Up here, we basically have turbo termites, so we have to use a very specific and strong type of treatment. So next up, I need to anchor this frame in place. And for that, I'm going to be using these expanding bolts. The concrete wall is less than 5 years old. I was here when it was built, so I know that it's going to take one of these bolts really well. The floor, however, was here before I moved in, and based on the rest of the slab, it's pretty poor quality. There's only one way to find out, and that's to start drilling holes. But with that in mind, I'm only putting in 2 of these bolts into the concrete. What you're looking at here is one of Bosch's biggest rotary hammer drills. This is what you pull out when you want to send a message. It's also worth mentioning the 2 bolts going into the concrete are going to be on the strike side of the door and the hinge side of the door, because those are the 2 points that are going to experience the most force regularly. So with all the wall framing done, the next job is to put a jamb in for the door. I was going to buy this material, but I was looking around my workshop the other day and noticed I have this board, which is some old pine, and I reckon I should be able to make this work. The placement of this door was intentional to help with jointing longer boards. This office blocks off some of the in-feed space for my jointer, but if I need to access that space, I can simply open the office door and I get an extra 1.2 meters. Got a whole lot of timber lying on the floor over here, as well as this over in the corner, and that is going to be used to cover this wall. The goal is to end up with a wall of different species of timber. So I'm going to mill this down to all the same width. I'll then set that aside. I can then move on to the next lot. I'll do the same with that, get that all to the same size, and then eventually I'll have a big pile of slats that I can start nailing to the framing. And for all the woodworkers in the room, in terms of medullary raise or medullary raise, however you say it, this timber, silky oak, it's amazing. The majority of this pile would end up being silky oak, but I tried to vary the color and tone as much as possible. Here's some old 70s pine. Let's add in some pale wood with something a little exotic. This is mango wood.
And then to add something darker, I have some leftover Merbau.
I've done some calculations. At 65mm wide boards, I'm gonna need about 52, 53 meters worth of timber. That is a lot of timber. To reduce that amount, I'm gonna try and find some wider boards. And something else I've got to think about as well is I need to nail all of these boards to the studs. That is a lot. That is a lot of nailing.
A leftover piece of plywood with an awkward shape. Perfect for what I need. I'm gonna be able to cut long strips out of this, and because it's a pale pine, it's going to contrast all of that silky oak that I've got, which is awesome. Next up, I'm working on the ceiling, and it's going to be made up of plywood attached up into joists. I use the term joists in air quotes because I'm going to be using some of this 70 by 35, which you wouldn't really associate with joists. It's too thin to take any kind of load. But again, because of this setup, there's going to be very little load on it. I've done a little bit of testing with these and they're going to be absolutely fine.
Okay, this two-man job is definitely not going to go wrong as a one-man job. Let's see how we go. I reckon I'm going to be able to get one screw in. Hopefully that's going to hold the board. All right, one in. Oh shit! I should have marked the line. Hey? Okay, let me see if I can just feel. There. Yeah, got it. Next bit's easy. That went better than expected. Got the wrong bits on. All right, I have a ceiling. Time to add a door. Nothing fancy here, just an internal hollow door, very straightforward, relatively inexpensive. I don't need to cut it to width because I made the jamb as wide as it needs to fit this door, but I will need to cut it lengthways because I've had to put in such a low ceiling because that's all I had space for. So I'll get this all cut up and hung and then pull it off and then paint it.
The reason I'm going to town on this thing is this is the perfect size to fit in that cavity. So if I can get all of this material off, then it will just slot straight in, easy done.
All right, 2 hinges. For that, I'm using these easy fit hinges. You can see essentially the hinge fits into itself. I've used these many times before, and it's pretty hard to get it wrong. To help with this, I'm going to be using one of these self-centering bits, and these are very divisive. I get comments from people, generally carpenters, who will say things along the lines of, this is an unnecessary tool, or it's just simpler to use a pencil, or just use a normal bit, which I do agree on in some cases. But in this scenario, I am not only finding the center of that hole, but I'm also using the tip of the self-centering bit to drill the pilot hole. So here, I think it makes sense to use one of these self-centering bits.
On a side note, to all the carpenters out there, do you use these templates? I've always found it easier to just draw the lines as opposed to cutting this out and taping it in place, etc., etc. I'm interested if you're in the trade, if that's what you do.
All right, so that's all the cutouts for the door. I'm not gonna do any more with the hardware because this needs to be painted first. And that is gonna happen at the same time that I paint the room. That is all of the downlights ready to go. But again, I'm not gonna install anything until all of the painting is done.
It is that time. I have done everything I can. There is nothing more that I can do until I paint this room. You can see the absolute joy on my face. I love painting. I'm not gonna subject you guys to that, so I'm gonna paint this, and then when I'm done, we can reconvene and carry on with the fun stuff.
All right, it's been a few days. The painting is done. There's a couple things to mention on it. I've gone with a flat matte black. I really like the look of black walls. And I've gone with a flat finish because I think it helps to just remove all of the light. I want my monitor to be where the light comes from, nowhere else. It's kind of like the logic that's followed when you build a home theater. You put felt on the walls to trap all of the light and reduce the reflections as much as possible. Something else to mention, I rolled the first 2 coats, and in the 3rd coat, I used a spray gun. It's the best way to get into all of those small pinholes. And then lastly, the lights are installed. I've gone with 4 down lights. They are 6 watt, so very low watt LED lights, but I've put a few of them in. So it really gives you a nice spread of light instead of having one bright light coming from a single point. I could be filming in here at some point, so I want to spread that light as much as possible. It just looks better on camera. All right, now I can continue with fitting this place out. That's all of the screws that I'm putting in for now. Later on, I'm gonna be putting in a desk and some shelves and all those brackets. I can hide these screws behind them. Also, don't worry about that stamp. The bottom half of this underneath the desk is gonna be painted black. I forgot that there's a slope on this, so now the door's caught. I'm gonna have to scrub the floor. Okay, that's better. I nailed on this door jamb. I mean, what are the chances of these nails being right where this strike plate's gonna go? Actually, I got a better idea. What if I just push that nail all the way in? Oh, that was easy enough. For the doorstop, I'm going to be using some of the sassafras that a friend gave to me. It's from Tasmania, and I think with that absolutely wild grain, it's going to look so cool as you walk through the door to see all of that. And with this side panel done, I can now move on to the main feature, which are the horizontal slats across this wall. I'm going to start from just above the door and work my way down. That way I get one solid band across the top. And then if I need to, or if I want to, I can then scribe to the floor. Bring on the time lapse. So far, everything is going well, but there are a few gaps starting to appear. I mean, I knew there were going to be some gaps along the way, but I'm worried they're starting to compound. So let me have a look with this straight edge. Yeah, it's still pretty flat. So it might be that some boards are ever so slightly warped, but I'll just keep checking it just so it doesn't run out. All right, main wall is done. Now I've just got to do up the other side and then one across the top. So now with the outside of the wall taken care of, I can turn my attention to the inside. These insulation bats are going in next. One of the goals of this room is to record voiceover, and I'm pretty sure you can hear the echo that I'm generating right now, which is unacceptable. So to reduce that, this wall and this wall are going to be filled with insulation wool, earth wool here in Australia. And then instead of putting plasterboard or some kind of hard material over the top, I'm going to add a fabric. That will essentially turn these two walls into giant acoustic bats. And then down the line, I'll probably put another acoustic bat on this wall and some up on the ceiling. But I'm getting this done in part one because this will be the wall. It's not something that I'm going to add or remove later. To cover the walls, I'm going to be using this This fabric type is called calico. I don't know very much about fabric, but I went to the store, looked through all the different types, and it was a toss-up between this and felt. Felt is obviously a very good option, but the reason I went with this is because of how transparent it is, and that's what you want to allow that sound to pass through. No, looks alright. Now it's got to cut off the excess.
Then came 3 days of adding these pine furring strips over all of the staples. The design evolved a bit as I went, but I knew I wanted the light timber against the dark fabric. And the last step was to create this window frame out of silky oak. At this stage, the video is getting a bit long, so I won't go into detail, but it's just a basic frame that got glued onto the wall.
And that brings us to today with the completed room behind me. I just want to reiterate, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. In the next video, I'm going to be doing more acoustic updates, putting in some kind of an exhaust fan to get the air flowing in there. I need to add a desk and shelves and other small bits here and there to turn this from just a room into a functioning office. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll try and answer as many as I can. But thank you very much for watching. My name is Robin Lewis. I'll see you guys in the next one.